seeing the presentation just shown to us that there's quite a lot of similarities, but there's also quite some differences. And this is also interesting to look at. My talk will be primarily about the way of planning in the Netherlands in the sense of starting up a process of negotiation and a certain strive for consensus. But in order to do that, I need to introduce the Randstad a little bit, and then I will try to embark on ways of organizing planning in formal and informal ways. So the Randstad is part of one of the densest part of Europe. So basically, you see around here lighting up in the night sky of Europe, having one of the most densely urbanized regions, but paradoxically, at the same time, it's a place where in Europe there's one of the lowest urban densities. So this is really important to understand. There's a lot of urbanization, but low density relatively. When we zoom in a bit, we can see the Randstad area set between the large metropolises of Paris, London, Berlin still visible, and the very urbanized regions of Flanders with Brussels in the middle and the Ruhr area. The Randstad bringing together about half of the Dutch population, 8 million people, and also obviously concentrated. Most of the economic developments are going on in the western part, the low-lying part of the Netherlands. So this low-lying is one of the crucial parts of the development of the Randstad. The Randstad is set in the delta. So border territory between sea and land, and this of course throughout the ages is both a handicap because of the devastation of the protective dikes now and again throughout centuries, but it's also an advantage, of course, very fertile soil and being on the crossroad of the river system of the Rhine, the Meuse, the Schelde, so basically a very large hinterland crossing with the international trade routes on the oceans ahead. So basically from the Middle Ages, this situation was used to its utmost advantage. But this also led to a process where currently we can compare the Netherlands most, geophysically speaking, most directly with a bowl. So with if we would not protect the area of the Randstad, it would almost completely disappear below sea level. So if there would be no dike system, it would flood up to 5 or 6 meters. So continuously, this land is being pumped dry, with literally hundreds of different water levels, which are being kept into centimeter precision by a sort of mutual agreement between agriculture and water bodies. So continuous negotiation is of primary importance for the Dutch to be existent. And this brought forward also a quite particular landscape that we worldwide we got to know through Dutch landscape painting in the 17th century, where you would see basically the landscape that brought forward two very typical cultures, let's say. The land excavated, being kept dry continuously, was too expensive to be left there, so it was very intensively used, so really up to the inch indeed. Every inch was being put into practice, and farmers lived on their own land, so being free farmers, hardly any villages starting to erect, But never far away, cities where the concentration of trade was concentrated appeared along the riverbeds, where the soil is strong enough to sustain build development. So basically very free, both in farming and in sort of middle-class town dwellers, both very free, very actively involved people with their country. Now to the Randstad, it's a very well-known and often told story that aviation pioneer Robert Plesman, the founder of the KLM, the Royal Dutch Airlines, invented the Randstad while flying over, in the beginning of the century, last century, flying over the low-lying Holland. He was looking for a place to position his airport. He saw a ring of cities with an empty core. So the Randstad literally meaning a ring with an empty heart. Of course, this is a very nice story, but truth is that the Randstad was invented as a planning concept in post-war planning era. And with the idea of developing a ring of cities into sort of true metropolitan development, however with an empty green heart. So when this idea was formulated in 1950, around and about, the Randstad looked somewhat like this. Basically, cities set into green agricultural land, which hardly changed in the last 3 centuries. When we look at it now, it looks like this. Of course, a completely different image, and like in most areas in the world, the post-war period gave rise to very extensive urban growth, and eventually to an almost uninterrupted sort of urban field with all different kinds of functions, with the big harbor, with the glass houses, with the agricultural land in between, sort of mixed together, hardly distinguishable one from another. Of course, it's visible that there has been some sort of planning policy implemented, but maybe it's even more visible where it did not really got what it wanted. So when you look at the growth map of the Randstad from the last century, you can see that before the war, more or less the urban area quadrupled, and after the war again. But you can also see that it's all of these little cores, all of these historic towns, which in one area or another played a very important role: Amsterdam, Rotterdam, The Hague, Utrecht, Leiden, Delft, etc. All sort of in themselves expanded. Of course, nowadays it's not necessarily the cities competing with each other, but more in a globalized world, and maybe even more specifically with the European integration going on. It's the urbanized regions within Europe which are competing with each other and which are continuously looking at each other, comparing themselves through numerous indicators. Here showing a graph which is updated on a yearly basis, basically to compare all of the indicators of these urbanized regions. And when we look at it, the Randstad is somewhere in the middle. It's performing quite well on certain things, of course, transshipment, etc., and employment being quite well, but in others it's failing quite significantly. Labor productivity is relatively low in the Netherlands. Capacity of railways, frighteningly low. High-tech jobs, we're really lagging behind. So, of course, it's interesting to look at these graphs also really in the sense of comparing to each other. But it also serves as a warning ground to understand what should be done next. What is the next important step? And the way the Randstad is being planned at the moment, you can say in diagram, you can look at it more or less like this. A couple of historically mostly grown, internationally competing complexes, with of course the harbor being very important, logistics around Schiphol, very important, but also agriculture still playing very important. Also a number, at least 5 of these very important internationally operating clusters set in a sort of very well organized international accessibility scheme, placed among sort of a large urban field between the 4 major cities of the Landstad. But there's hardly anything which mediates between these two. There's hardly any infrastructures, being in the sense of transport, but also in the sense of landscape, or in the sense of economic activities that connect the top to the bottom. And not only is it sort of inefficient, but also at